Welcome to the Bill and Kap Show. I am Bill Goodland. I'm riding solo today. Kap couldn't be with us. We have a very exciting guest today. One of my best buds in real estate, small multifamily extraordinaire, now turned syndicator, Cole Farrell. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, thanks, man. So tell us a little bit about where you're at now and kind of how you got there. What does
Yeah,
your portfolio
so
look like right now? What are you focusing on?
absolutely. So I'll kind of dive into, let me start with the backstory first, and then I'll kind of bring you up to speed of where we are now. So without going, crazy deep
Sure.
into it, I was in school and trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. I was getting my bachelor's in finance, and I knew I wanted to do something with money, something with finance, and I didn't know really what that looked like. So I ended up talking to a whole lot of people and just exploring different realms, and I ended up meeting someone that was in real estate. And at the time, this guy had like 80 units, and his whole thing was, hey, I can do, whatever I want with my time, and I basically just, you know, am free. And I was like, oh, that's such a cool idea. And obviously, that's why a lot of people are attracted to this, and I think that's huge. So I was hooked on that, and I started going to meetings with this guy, and he taught me a lot just off the bat. And then eventually, I was like, hey, I really want to do this. I'd like to dive in. But I have no money. So, would you consider seller financing something for me? And he was like, let me think about it. And so we chatted some more, and then eventually he was like, yeah, I think so. Like, we'll see what happens. Let's kind of just ride it out. And then I was working for a family at the time, so I was just, like I said, in school, kind of figuring things out. And he called me one day. He's like, hey, are you still into this real estate thing? And I was like, yes, absolutely. And he was like, awesome, because I just bought a property and now you owe me a mortgage and we're going to figure this out. And I was like, okay, here we go. So that was the start of it all. So we bought a duplex in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is, where my portfolio is now. And it was a learning curve, I will say. So we bought this duplex. Both tenants were absolute nightmares. One had to be evicted, lawsuits. The other one was a drug dealer going through that, shamble. It was an adventure. So as they, left and kind of destroyed the place basically, went in, did my own reno, and just went through the whole thing. So anyways, did that, and after a while came out successful from that and was like, wow, I'm actually making money from this now and I'm not doing anything. This is incredible. So I was like, all right, bigger and better. So started buying a couple more units, started bringing people on, family, friends, and just building a portfolio. And I got a couple small multifamily units, and then that was when I was just getting out with my master's. And so I was like, okay, what's next? And at the time is when COVID hit. So COVID was a big issue, and I was bartending my way through school. And so once I got out of school, once COVID hit, I was like, all right, well, I'm stuck. I got no job, nowhere really specific to go. So it's the time to figure it all out. So I ended up, meeting somebody at a meetup months before, and they did property management. And so I was like, you know what? I think I'll launch a management company. I'm doing this these couple units pretty good. I think I can do this big time.
Yeah, what
And
could
so
go
I,
wrong, right?
yeah, right. Oh, it's easy. You just collect rent, fix a couple things, no big deal.
That's it.
So I met this guy, and so he was like, hey, I don't think you're ready for this. Why don't you come work with me for a little bit and see if you like it and see how it goes. And then if you want to do it, I'll back you and we'll kind of just go from there. And I was like, cool. Love this. So we ended up going and working for him for a while. Got my license in PA because to manage you need your license here, and I learned an incredible amount, more than I can even possibly describe. They just taught me everything, and he became a mentor to me, and it was just fantastic. But through that, ended up absolutely hating that process, hated management, hated my clients, not my thing. So fired everybody, and I was like, let's do something else. So the that guy, we ended up building a wholesale and kind of wholesale slash flipping company together, and that became our gig, and we still hold that now. And so we do a couple deals a year, and we do that, and that's pretty cool. And at the same time, I was like, all right, let's really go for the moon and use all this momentum to kind of go bigger. And so I started the syndication company, which is where I've always wanted to go, and started really building from there. And so now we're on our first bigger deal and kind of going through that. And that's kind of where we're at now.
Wow. So I definitely want to dive into that big deal. And I know you got probably plenty to say about that deal. But let's
Lots.
backtrack a little bit. Yeah, I'm sure. Let's backtrack a little bit to kind of what that process was like at a young age. Like, how old were you when you first were? Because I know you're still pretty young now. How old are you now?
Yeah, 25 now. So
Wow,
25
and
now, and I
you're
got that.
crushing it.
I appreciate it.
All right, and how old were you in college when you were just like, oh yeah, maybe I'll try this real estate thing?
Yeah, so I was 18 at the time, and that's when that first duplex came
Wow.
along. And, I had nothing to lose. So I was like, all right, let's dive in, see what happens.
And when did you end up actually closing on that? Because I know there's a little bit of back and forth, and eventually he just came back to you and was like, "Hey, like let's figure something out."
Yeah, so we closed it on March 23rd of 2017. So that was the day.
Wow, wow. So that's pretty incredible. What was it like managing tenants when you were just a college kid?
Dude, it
Can't
was
imagine
weird,
that.
and it's funny. There's just so many different avenues. So when I first started that, I didn't really understand how to manage people or tenants or anything, and so he was super, super helpful. Where if there's an issue, they would call me, but then I would call him and say like, "What do I do?" And so we would walk through that stuff, and it was a learning curve. And I'm sure a lot of people jump in and figure it out, and it kind of did. But the biggest hurdle at that point was I look young now, and if you can only imagine what I looked like at 18, it was interesting. So I would go to these places to fix things, and at the time I wasn't really aware that you shouldn't tell people you're owner, and they just kind of found out, and they were like, "How is this 12-year-old kid own this property? Why should I give him rent?" And so that was definitely a challenge or something to kind of overcome and figure out.
Wow. So did they originally did they expect that the guy you bought it off of was still the landlord and you were just, the maintenance guy helper, or how did that
Yeah.
actually work?
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. We kind of
Gotcha.
played it that way. If there was like a serious issue, I'd be like, "Hey, I'm just kind of like helping this guy out. I don't know anything," and it was just so blurry. Like the lines were so unclear. I didn't really know what the lines were. He didn't really know what the lines were. We just kind of figured it out as the scenario came up. Um, so
Wow. So if there's a young future real estate investor listening at 18, 19 years old, you hear seller financing. That's usually like something, an advanced strategy that people with a portfolio of a lot of properties, they start getting creative. They're sourcing for deals and they eventually make seller financing work. I've never heard of anyone getting seller financing on their first deal. Is that something you'd recommend, or do you feel like going about it another way might be better?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I think I highly recommend it, and for a few reasons. So, for one, especially when you're that young, like, most people, myself included, had not a dime to their name. We have student debt, we have other things going on, figuring life out, and so you have no money. And so I think seller financing is a great avenue to get started. I think the caveat to that is you have no track record. So, trying to say, "Hey, hold this loan for me, and, I promise I'll pay you," is a difficult thing for somebody to accept, especially when you're 18, which, especially in this time and age, people, just have no credibility anymore. Or, it's just a weird time. So I think finding a way to prove yourself and get them to trust you early on and establish like a good faith is the most imperative thing at that point. Is just proving that to them that, hey, I will pay you back. Hey, we'll follow through. And if you can make that happen, then it just builds and builds and builds. And for instance, this guy that I worked with, he became we became very close after that deal, and so he's like still a mentor to me now, and he's taught me everything. It's been incredible. And so we work together on deals, and I'm still buying pieces of his portfolio. So it just takes that one deal to get started, to build that relationship and trust. And now whenever something comes up, he knows I'll follow through. He knows I will do it because it's what I've proven in the past.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And then, you started to build your portfolio. Tell me a little bit more about that. I know you're doing the flips and wholesales and now the syndication. Tell me about kind of that next phase of where you went from just a duplex to, well, I think when we first started being friends, you were like, "Oh yeah, I'm just buying a package full of deals," which for me, I'm like, "I'm buying one house." So tell us about how that next step. Once you kind of got your footing as a landlord, you sort of knew that maybe I shouldn't tell my tenants, that I'm the owner, and put some processes in place. Tell us about kind of that next step of you went from complete newbie to like, okay, I sort of have a decent idea of what I'm doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of came at the time of a couple different things. So what I mean by that is, when I mentioned that I started doing management and I just got out of school and I started going full time, basically, is when I started really building. And so when I started really building is when I, focused on getting my license, reading as many books as I could get my hands on, and getting serious with it. And that's the point when I started buying a portfolio, like you mentioned. So it was a 7 unit portfolio. It was five singles and a duplex, and they're almost all in row. It's like the same corner. And so I purchased that. I brought some family into that just to back it for capital. And so purchased that, and the plan was to go in, buy these 7 units, and they were rough. We got a fair price. It wasn't an absolute screaming deal at the time. At least I didn't think it was. And but got a decent deal, and it was going to go in, reno each one, and then let's refi, pull all of our money out, and hold it. So that was the plan, and of course, it never happens like it's supposed to. Um, but bought those units, and that ended up, doing pretty well, and I can explain that more in a minute. So that was two, and then we had nine, and then I bought another single, which was seller finance from the same guy, which was next door to these other ones. Still hold that now. And then after that, I bought a 3 unit, also from the same guy on the other side of the block. So we started to, take over this entire block. And the 3 unit is one of my favorite properties. I've had my eyes on that forever. And it was a mixed use, 2 apartments on top, storefront on the bottom. Same plan. Went in, rented the whole thing, and we didn't refi it yet because we have prepayments and whatnot. But just kind of it's doing really well.
Wow. So your story is pretty interesting because, like I said, not many people think to do seller financing kind of early on in their career. And I know maybe one other guy that has some mixed use, maybe two. And like mixed use is something that I feel like a lot of people don't really focus on. And so tell me a little bit more about that. Like what made you interested in that deal? How's that deal going now? And all I hear is that, commercial is tough to rent nowadays. Tell me a little bit more about that deal.
Yeah, I think so personally I'll start with I love mixed use. I think mixed use is incredible. And there's a couple different reasons and there's a couple different like size variants. And what I mean by that is there's, a mixed use like I have that's the smallest piece is like a 3 unit, maybe 2 apartments and a retail. And then there's something mixed use which maybe is 20 units with retail or whatever, and then there's something, a huge complex, couple hundred units with stores underneath. I love just the mixed use model because you have I feel like a little bit more of a community feel, and what I mean is like as you go to the bigger stuff it's different, but if you have 100 or so units or something massive and then you have a coffee shop underneath or maybe something like a grocery store, that's just a crazy community feel, and I feel like that's just such a value to have both to your tenants and to the whole property. But on a smaller scale, like I was doing, I was just attracted to the model. I can't really tell you why. I just was like, I love this, and I just want to test it out. I think I've just always been attracted to the retail model, and I was like, I want to see what happens when I own the place that the business is in, and I want to see how that goes. Like I like the idea of controlling another business. I just thought it was kind of a neat thing. So bought this property, and the first floor of the storefront was empty. So it's definitely a bit of a mental challenge to go, okay, I'm going to go buy this building, which is performing very poorly and is partially empty and probably the hardest spot. And it wasn't in the greatest area. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know what's going to rent this. I have an idea. It was like 500 square feet. And I went in and renovated the whole thing, made it look really nice, which is a whole nother piece. We can get into build outs and how people run through that. And there's different options, but I just was like, you know what, I'm going to give them a good product from the start, and if they want to build off of that, perfect. But I'm going to give them, everything done, and then if they want to adjust, they can adjust. So I did that, started doing the other apartments, and it took a while to get it rented, a couple months, I would say. But it's just how commercial goes. It's not like where the demand is crazy now with normal residents, where you can put it online on Zillow. 2 days later, you have a million responses. The commercial's slow, and you really got to feel them out, and you really got to go through their info. Are they going to stay a long time? Is their business sustainable? Do they have other businesses? Are they going to crash and burn? The leases are different, so there's a huge difference in that, and that was definitely a learning curve, which I didn't really expect it to be so intense. But I would definitely recommend it for other people. I think it's like a niche that most people are afraid of, so I think it kind of gives some leverage if you can, be comfortable with it.
Yeah. Did you lease that unit up yourself? Did you get a commercial broker to help you out, or tell us about that?
Yeah, at the time I wasn't very familiar with brokers or yeah, really realtors. And I was a realtor, but I didn't really know how that stuff worked, which is kind of funny. So I leased it myself. I put a big sign in the window. I posted it on LoopNet, Crexy, or wherever, or not LoopNet, I'm sorry, just Crexy, Facebook, anywhere I could possibly think of, Craigslist, and I would just get hits on it. And eventually, somebody called, and there's a lot of referrals. Anyone looking for a
Hmm.
storefront, oh, my friend is, or whatever. So eventually, I had these people come in, and they wanted to do a vape shop, and so they had a couple other stores in the valley and just nearby. So I drove to those places, checked them out, checked out their finances, checked out their backgrounds, did the whole thing like you would a resident, just on like a business sense. And we went through it and drawn up a lease, and they moved in and did some other things. But overall, it was honestly an easy transition. I thought it'd be a little more difficult, like actually doing it, but it wasn't.
Wow, that's super interesting. You might be selling me a little bit on mixed use that I shouldn't shy away from it. It's funny that you bring up the coffee shop above 100 unit or something like that. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this story to you, but Back in my grad school days when I was going to Philly meetups, I remember somebody talking about one of the Philly developers that would go into these kind of pretty rough neighborhoods that he was looking to turn around, and he would actually put a coffee shop in first. People assume that, there's low income housing, people start moving in, like the typical gentrification story that, the houses have become nicer, those people that have nicer houses, have more money to spend on amenities, and then the amenities come in, the nice gyms, the Starbuckses, the boutique coffee shops. And this guy in this Philly neighborhood, I think it was Point Breeze, I could be wrong, apparently put a coffee shop into a pretty rough neighborhood, and then he started buying up the block and just flipping a ton of properties. And then, the people that are buying these flips, they look down the street and they see, oh, there's this bougie looking coffee shop. This is an up and coming neighborhood. Meanwhile, they were early in, and this guy didn't care if he was losing money on the bougie coffee shop, because all the houses he was buying and selling, were going up in value because they see that and they're like, oh, it's up and coming, here we go. And I just thought that was like super interesting way to kind of like use a commercial business to kind of attract the type of tenants or type of end buyer if you're flipping. I just thought that was a super interesting story. But this
Brilliant,
podcast is about
brilliant.
me, so we'll or about this Philly developer. But we'll go back to your story. So all right, you got these 13 units. You're kind of managing things yourself. You're managing for other people. You said you fired your clients. What went into that decision?
Yeah, so it was a lot of time was the issue with it, and it was something I honestly hated. So I don't like managing the tenants and managing the properties and doing the repairs. So I was doing absolutely everything. If a sewer line broke, I'm there, I'm fixing it. If there's a rent issue, I'm at court. So it was going through all that, and that's one thing to do your own properties where it's your money on the line and your stake, but it's a little bit different when you have other people's properties and your own and just so many things happening at once. So that was the difficulty, is like, where do you spend your time? And the whole time doing that, I still wanted to go bigger. So I was trying to build something bigger while managing for other people, while still managing my own stuff. And at the end of the day, I didn't have enough time, and so I had to cut something. So I had to find some way to replace that income, and also find some way out of that because I knew it just wasn't my passion. So that's kind of how that transitioned or went.
Sure. So when I first met you, you were the the young kid that worked at Starbucks with a extermination company on the side that was going to build this massive property management company. But oh, by the way, I'm going to get my master's degree in the meantime for who knows why. That was my first introduction to you, Cole. And then a year or two later, you're doing awesome. You're crushing. Every time I see you, you got
Appreciate
something
it.
new in the works, and it's been super impressive to see. Yeah, absolutely. But then all of a sudden, it's like, oh no, this management, it sucks. I can't do it. What was that shift for you to say, okay, I need to? I know it was time, but you went from a management. I'm going to build a huge management company. This is spending too much time. And then once you kind of said, maybe building a gigantic management company isn't for me. What became kind of that next thing for you? Was it the flipping, wholesaling? Was it going bigger with apartments? Tell us what kind of shifted your mindset. I know it was the time, but then like
Yeah.
where did you decide to go from there, and what went into
Yeah.
that?
So I think when I was doing management is when I really kind of peaked on like, I really don't like this. I really don't want to do this. And thankfully, I didn't get far enough in where it was a problem. So I was like, okay, this is not my thing. Now what? And that was a huge, I guess, shift. So I started figuring out, okay, what if I did some flips? What if I did this? And it just went all over the place. And point being, I ended up settling on, I want to do bigger multifamily. That's where I've always wanted to go. That's like what I'm passionate about. I just need to figure out a way to get there because at the time I couldn't enter. I didn't have the upfront capital to raise stuff. I didn't have enough track record in my eyes to do that. So I was like, okay, I want to leave management. I want to get to big multi. There's a gap in between. How do I do that? And so for me, I was like, okay, if I start phasing out management and I find something else to replace that, to start funding this company and start building that at the same time, that's what I should do. And so that's exactly how it went. I started phasing out management slowly, and then we started doing the flips and the wholesales, which was honestly pretty dicey at the time. I mean, it made sense, but there's no guaranteed checks or anything like that. A lot of it takes a while. So we started marketing like crazy, and I just did that full time. And it's just what it takes. It's all hours of the day, and you put everything into it, and you sacrifice. And we started getting a couple deals, and it started rolling, and it picked up. And it was a lot of learning, and a lot of things went wrong that we figured out, but it went well. And so as things started closing and we started making money off of that, at the same time I was like, okay, this is where I need to put absolutely everything into building this company that I want to do. So that started funding the company that I was building and also my lifestyle. So we kept building that. And then I, kept building the syndication company until it was ready to take off. And basically, those are the two things I focus on now. So I was able to drop management by doing the flips and the wholesales, and then launch a syndication company, which is kind of goes in tandem with the flips and stuff. They kind of, allow me to do everything at the same time.
Sure. And you mentioned wholetailing. For those that don't know, can you explain that a little bit? Because I think that's a super interesting strategy that more people should consider. Like why people might have heard of wholesaling, but explain that.
Yeah, so I'll start with wholesaling first, and most people know this, but we'll kind of dive in because it makes it it's a good point. So wholesaling is you get a property under contract, and then you assign that contract to somebody else, but you never own it, and you take a cut for a commission or something. But the key there is you don't ever own it, so you could back out or whatever it is. Is what it is. Wholesaling, on the other hand, is you do own it. So you get something under agreement and you do buy it, and you then sell it afterwards. And that sale afterwards could be, the same hour. It could also be a week later. It could also be a month later. Depends on the property. So, we've done things where we've wholetailed, where we'll buy a property, clean it out, and then sell it. We've bought some where we literally didn't even change the locks, didn't even walk in the door, and we sold it. We've done others where we turned it into a full flip, where we bought it, and then fixed the whole thing up. So that's not even a wholesale; it's just a flip. But different things, and a couple reasons that might be important is it gets a little gray with the ethics and kind of I don't want to say legalities because it's completely legal to wholesale. I'm no lawyer, I'm no accountant or whatever, but it's a little dicey sometimes in some states. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing everything very clean and ethically, and so it's just another avenue to protect yourself. If you own it and you present yourself as, hey, I'm the buyer and I am going to buy this, and then you do and you take ownership, it's up to you what you do with it because now it's my property. Where if you wholesale, you're kind of misrepresenting yourself and kind of playing in the gray quite a bit. And so, not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but we just thought it was a little bit cleaner to wholetail. And, we actually, there's a lot bigger profits in wholetail because it takes a lot more to it. You got to figure it out how to get the money and then purchase it and go through that. But if you own it, you can kind of command a higher price because now it's in your full control. You're not at the will of, the seller when you don't actually own it.
Yeah, and when you're putting it on the market too, you're having so many more eyes on the property. If you can,
Right.
it might be a little bit capital intensive for you to close on the property, and yes, you got to consider any title issues, and you might have to get the place cleaned out. And honestly, you could do as much or as little to the property as you want. But if you have an equity spread there, if you're buying a deal for significantly below market, I would argue that if you have the capital, or at least access to capital, to close on it and put it on the market, at least the last year or two when the market's been super hot, you're going to get a much better price, on the market if you can manage to do that, as opposed to trying to get, an assignment fee from a cash buyer who's going to expect to buy the property at a discount. But they're, retail home buyers nowadays buying these fixer-uppers because that's the only house they can afford.
And that's critical. What you just said there is the difference between the cash buyer and the retail home buyer. Because if you're wholesaling it, it has to be cash. That's your only option, right? But if you own it, if you wholesale it, there's some FHA guidelines you got to work with if you're going to go that route. It's like a 3-month holding period that you have to own it. But that's still, not much when you're talking about an end buyer, someone that's going to keep it, like you said, fix it up. And we've seen a lot of that. We've had a huge difference in profit margins from selling to somebody that's an end buyer versus, someone that, like you said, wants a discounted cash.
Yeah, and if I could provide like a brief example of why you kind of mentioned that wholesaling can sometimes be a little bit tricky ethically. And I know some people that do it the right way, and I've come across some people that do it the wrong way. There's a guy both you and I know that is super upfront when he does assignment deals. He tells the seller like, hey, I will buy your property. I'm going to buy this property from you, but I have partners that I work with. They sometimes bring me deals. I sometimes bring them deals. Like they're very upfront that somebody might end up be the one closing on this, and they explain like, hey, if we bring each other deals, sometimes there's a fee associated with that. because we're doing each other a solid. Like you're okay with that. That makes sense, right? And
Right.
the most sellers, if you explain it the right way, will sort of understand. I mean, sure, will the seller, if they see you making a $40,000 spread on their $100,000 house, be feel some type of way at the closing table? Absolutely. But if it's 5 or 10 grand, I think most sellers that are reasonable, probably understand that. And I think that's where the people that wholesale ethically, do it the right way. A lot of times they're getting the seller from a tough situation, and they'd rather just sell it quick. And a lot of people might know that they're selling at a discount. Where I think it gets tricky is people that get a property under contract. They have no means of being able to close the deal, and they're just hoping and praying that somebody's willing to offer a little bit more than what they have under contract, and they'll take whatever. And if they screw over the seller, it doesn't mean anything to them. I just looked at a property yesterday, and I don't know if I should give away too many details, but it was listed in one of our local Facebook groups. They wanted 180 for the property, and I'm like, okay, it's the exact area that I'm looking. Like, I'm not going to pay 180 for this property, but you never know. And I go to see the property, and it might be, I run some comps, it might be worth 170, 180 on the market. They said, oh, you could sell it as is for, originally it was 220. And then the wholesaler was like, oh, it could sell as is for 200. And I'm like, a really nice rehabbed one on this block, this many square feet, could sell for 200. Okay, it's 180. Here are my comps. And there's a good comp at like 172. And I'm like, okay, that's rehabbed comp at 172. You're asking 180 all cash for a relatively quick close. And then I get more information. I'm like, hey, listen, like I would buy this house, but like I would need to be in for 125. You get more information, and they're like, well, if I need 145 or I'm not going to make any money on this deal. And I'm like, okay, you got it under contract for too much. Like, I'm sorry, but,
Yeah.
and then I get more information. The house is going into foreclosure. The reason they need to close by the end of March is because it will get foreclosed the next day on the 1st of April. So this wholesaler is locking up this property from these sellers. And I think that they could throw it on the market for like, hey, we need a quick close, preferably all cash, 160K or whatever. And like, I think they might actually get that on the market. There might be some New York buyer that's just like, oh, whatever, like, and buy the property. They owe 110 on it. And here's what's going to happen is she's not going to accept anything below 145 because she didn't actually explain to the seller, hey, listen, if you want to actually get the foreclosure off of your record, you should be happy with anything above what you owe. And basically, that's the issue that I see of somebody locking up a property and basically putting the sellers in a bad position. You think that you're doing a good thing. Well, oh, I'm going to get them more money. I'm going to make more money for myself. Like, well, this deal is not going to close unless we get it to a number that makes sense. So going off that, how have you? Because I know you've gotten some pretty good deals, and you're kind of the one going back and forth to the seller. And I promise you, I'm going to get to your syndication stuff, but
No rush.
I want this to be kind of like applicable for our listeners too. Like
Of course.
if for someone that's like, okay, I need to start building my portfolio, I need to start finding good deals. Sometimes, as I said, we need to explain to these sellers in order for this deal to work for an investor. We need to get it at a certain price. And if you don't like that, that's fine. But, you should be talking to a real estate agent, not an investor, if that's the case. How have you been able to, negotiate with sellers and kind of get comfortable talking about uncomfortable things with a lot of people when they're in some distress?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is what you mentioned is it goes back to like providing them a true benefit. Like it's a shame what you meant the story you just told about the person in foreclosure because they're going to end up in a bad spot, and no one's going to make out well, and it's a shame. And I think a lot of that is I know we're all in this to make some money, and that's the point. But the real goal here is I think for us all to help each other and get ourselves to be in a better place. And a lot of that comes through with your offers and what you're talking to them. It's not always about the money, right? It's going in and saying like, hey, what is the problem here, and like how can we work this out? And that usually boils down to some kind of number and some kind of thing that you can solve monetarily. But the whole problem is usually never just a figure. So a lot of stuff is we're going in and it always starts off numbers. Usually it starts off kind of rough. What's your number? What's your offer? And we try to dig in some get some details and see what's the problem here? Is there distress or just that whole scenario. And I think what we really do well is figuring that out and then solving their problem, and so we can all come out in a good spot. Of course we want a good deal, but we'd rather do a deal and close a deal than have nothing. Of course, there's limits to that, but I think it's just solving their problem.
Sure. And so, what do you do when someone calls you? Because I know you send out a lot of direct mail, and someone says, "I got this letter." You know, old Billy Bob says, "I got this letter in the mail, and you're saying you want to buy my house. Okay, buy my house. I want $1 million. You gonna give it to me?" Like, and then they say, "What are you gonna offer me?" Um, how do you respond to that question? Because that's a common question that I get, and I've a lot of other investors get the same thing, and different people have different approaches to it. So what's yours when it comes to that?
Yeah, so I don't have like a direct script, but I kind of just go off the feel. So basically, we send out a system. Well, here's our system, right? So we send out a mailer, and it's myself and my partner, like we mentioned, and we always have his name on it. And although that seems odd at first, it's helped us tremendously. So when they call, they say, "Hey, is this Nick?" And although my name is Nicholas, truly, I go by Cole. And so I know immediately if they say, "Is this Nick?" they're referencing our mailer. So a lot of times it's tough when you have a lot of different things going on. You answer, "Hey, what's going on?" or just whatever. It's hard to get in sales mode or figure that out off the bat. So as soon as I pick up the phone and they say, "Hey, is this Nick?" and I go, "Okay, sales mode, take a breath, turn it on," right? And so they say, "No, this is Cole, but we work together, what do you have going on?" And then they go, "Oh, I got your letter, blah, blah, blah." And usually whatever they say, if they come in harsh, I try to talk them down. If they come in nice, you just, match it, whatever it is. And I go, "Hey, I'm happy to do that. But I need to get some details first, and I'll explain the process." And I usually try to dive into that and I go, "Look, I need to get some info from you. And once we get some info, I'm going to be able to throw out like a ballpark number. If the ballpark number is close, then, we'd love to come out and see the property. And once we see it, then, we can give you a hard number. And if you like the hard number, then we'll get under agreement, we'll close it in 10 to 15 days and we're done." Makes it easy. But, I always harp on like, I'm not trying to waste your time. I also am busy. And so I'm not going to tie this up and make a whole long conversation pointless. I want to get a couple quick facts. I'm going to do some research. I'm going to call you back with our number or what we're roughly thinking. And if we're not close, then we're done. Sorry, it's just, not interested. It's not going to work. But if we are kind of close, then I'll spend the time and go forward and go, "Okay, let's really push this. Let's literally see if we can make this work." But, if we're way, way off or they're just being a jerk and if they're like, "I want 400 and I researched it before, I look it up real quick while I'm talking to them on Zillow and this estimate's 100K below that," it's worthless. The conversation is just not even worth continuing.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting that you say, you tell the seller ahead of time, "Listen, I'm busy too. I don't want to waste your time. I'm not looking to, to have my time wasted either." And I think that's pretty valuable because a lot of the sellers that I've talked to, they are getting bombarded. A lot of these
Right.
sellers that own decent sized portfolios in their own personal name, where their phone number can be easily skip traced, they're getting hit up by like 15 wholesalers a week that are talking to them, and like some of them might honestly be interested in selling, but some people, they had a wholesaler lock their property up under contract. Of course, they locked it up for too much and they couldn't sell it, or they talked to a real estate agent but they don't like the idea of having open houses. It's like they've a lot of times you're not the first person that they've talked to, and they're just frustrated. I know when I've just applied for a mortgage for my own primary residence, you get 20 calls the first day that you have your credit pulled from one lender.
Right.
And like, by my like third phone call, I'm pretty frustrated. I'm like, "Take me off your marketing material. I don't like, I'm not interested. I already have a lender. Thanks anyway." And I get pretty annoyed too. And the first like one or two, you're like, "All right, what do you got for me?" And then, so I think it's a good point to make of saying like to the sellers, like, "Listen, I'm willing to work with you here. I'm willing to close this deal." And I think giving hard numbers of like 10 to 15 days, because some people, it's a little ambiguous. They're like, "Oh, when am I going to get paid? Do you need a loan? Is this going to be cash?" Being very direct about like what expectations are, I think is really valuable, because a lot of people's dissatisfaction with certain things is not having expectations met. So if you can put that up front and deliver on that, I think it's really powerful, and that's where referrals of good business come from.
Yeah, and one more kind of tip on that too. One other thing that I've learned is, well, two tips. So one, I think being transparent and just offering things that could help them. We don't really like to do the whole proof of funds thing because it's kind of frustrating. But if you can tell that that's an issue and they're worried about that, or they're worried about closing, or do you have the funds? I think calling it out, saying, "Hey, if you want proof of funds, we got it. If you want this, we have it. If you want whatever, we can provide that for you." And I think nailing that, up front is big. And I think another huge thing that I've found super successful, which I don't even like to give out this tip because it works so well. But when somebody calls and they're all fired up, "What's your
We
offer?
have four
What, what?"
listeners. It's fine.
Yeah, those four listeners are going to get good use out of this. When somebody's all fired up, whether
Good.
in any case, with the mailers or just cold calling, you just go, hey, look, I'm sure you're getting a ton of robocalls, right? I'm sure that you're getting a lot of wholesalers. Like, I'm an investor too. I get the same calls. Super frustrating. And just trying to point out, like, I'm not that. Yes, I want to buy your property at a discount, but, I'm not that guy that's going to has that bad reputation. I feel like there's a lot of bad rep going around with that stuff. And I notice that after I say like, oh my gosh, those wholesalers are so annoying. I'm so sick of their calls. Even if I am one, they come down immediately. Oh yeah, they're the worst. And then they level out every single time. So just another tip to try.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Like touching on a pain point, I feel like a lot of successful negotiators kind of talk about that is trying to get away from the number and then like where's the pain at? Like, oh, you're probably tired of hearing from so many wholesalers, like, which triggers something in their head that says, you know what? Yeah, I am tired of dealing with these wholesalers. This guy gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that uh, a defense barrier is kind of like taken down a notch. So that's really good. And I know you've gotten a bunch of good deals under contract, but let's talk bigger stuff now. So tell me about what you're focusing on right now. Tell me about this deal you got under contract and kind of the story of what made you start marketing to this and tell me about that process of getting this property under contract.
Absolutely. And I love this property. I love talking about it because it's such like in my eyes, like a cliche, almost iconic story, right? So it's not a huge property. It's 9 units, but it's local to us, and it's good because it's in our backyard. But this property I actually got from a mailer, which is funny. And again, it's on the smaller side, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But it's from a mailer, and I sent them a basic one, and it was like a test run, a year before. And so we're under contract now. We're going through the process. They got the mailer. They called, hey, we got your mailer interested, and I said, okay, cool. And we went through that, and we ran some numbers, and then it dropped off. And then 3 months later, they call back, hey, we think we're interested now. We'd like to set up a time to come see it, and go through more details. Cool. Come on over at this time. Let's chat. Come to the office. Oh, we're sick. Never mind. We'll contact you in a few months. We're not ready yet. Super frustrating. Okay, sounds good. A couple months go by. Hey, we're actually ready this time. Let's talk. And at this point, you're just like, all right, you just keep going with it. Because you just never know. And so we went and they actually met us at our office. They came over and we talked with them and we kind of ironed out what they're looking for in numbers. And it was a little steep. And I was like, all right. And ended up talking with them a lot, figuring out the whole situation. They're in a 1031. They have X amount of time. They have their timeline. They have this going into it, yada, yada, yada. And so got under contract a little bit later after dealing with that stuff. There's a big push trying to get their attorneys on board, getting everybody to sign everything. It just took a while. It was frustrating, and that's the normal case with like a mom and pop owner. If somebody's not running like a true investment business, that's how it goes. So we finally got it under agreement, and now we're going through the raise now, and so. It's been a learning curve going through all these different pieces, but it's been exciting. So
Okay, awesome. So, for those that don't know, they hear a 25-year-old is buying a 7-figure deal. Tell us how you're doing that. What exactly is a syndication company, and tell us how that works.
absolutely. So I'll start with the syndication, right? And I'll kind of boil it down to one of the best I guess metaphors or analogies that I've ever heard, which I will hopefully not screw up here. But it's similar to, it's called like a jumbo jet strategy, right? So, everybody's trying to get to Freedom Island, and you have to take a plane to Freedom Island. And there's, your pilots, and then there's your passengers. And so your pilots are the ones that, take off, fly the plane, make sure everything's good while in the air, land the plane, and then help you get off. So they direct everything. And your passengers buy a ticket, hop on, kick their feet up, and they eventually get to Freedom Island and they're good. So how that works is we do the same thing where we're like the pilots in this deal. So there's two groups. We're the pilots. We find the deal. We get financing set up. We get management set up. Every piece to this, and then we buy it. We make sure everything goes well. We manage it the whole way, and then we sell it or refi whatever the capital event is. and anybody that's along with us, which is like your passengers, get benefits along the way. So their ticket, like the plane, is they put in an investment, whether it's 25, 50, 100, a million, into the deal, and they don't have to do anything. Their only responsibility is to bring capital, and then afterwards, they get cash flow, they get their tax benefits, they get all sorts of different things throughout, and then they also get a big chunk of money at the end. So all they have to do is bring capital to the table, and they can just make sure everything goes well, read the reports, but they get where they're trying to go, and we get where we're trying to go. So we don't have to, put in a seven-figure deal, we don't have to put in, 250,000 or whatever the amount is, or, a couple 100,000 million. We can raise that money from other people.
Sure. So what's the benefit for you, and then what's the benefit for a limited partner? Obviously, a limited partner might say, well, I'm giving you this money, I'm going to get a return. Tell me what the pros and cons are to each kind of level of that partnership there.
Yeah, so let's start with the limited partners, people that are, just investing capital. It's beneficial to them because they're not doing anything. And, it's not like they're people that necessarily are either too busy or doing something else, and so that's why they need their money to work from them. This past year, inflation, is near double digits or in double digits, which is out of control. So if you have money and you're sitting on it, it's going out the window. And so you need to put it somewhere. And so for them, they can put it here and it'll double or it'll do really well, and they don't have to do anything. They can just focus on whatever else is going on in their life. So that's the big benefit. Um, the opposition I always hear to that is, oh, I want to build my own portfolio. I mean, I 100% support that. I do the same thing. So if you want to build your own portfolio, go for it, but it takes the time and effort into it. That's something like I'm willing to do. That's what my career is. That's what I enjoy doing. And so that's why I want to run the deal. I also make money from it. And so that's the whole point. But if we can benefit other people at the same time, I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do you get paid? Point
How do
blank.
I get paid?
You
Next
you
question.
you get this deal under contract. You're if I'm a limited partner and I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you $50,000 to put into this deal. You're putting in all the legwork. Uh have the relationships with the lenders, with marketing for this deal. And I know you spend a lot of money and time into marketing. Where does it come in for you? And obviously, you can look at a pro forma and say, if I'm a limited partner, I'm going to get X amount. Okay, that's better than a savings account. What's in it for you, and how are your like limited partners protected in that sense?
Yeah, so what's in it for us is we get paid in a few different ways. Like you said, a lot of this comes up front. It's a lot of marketing. It's a lot of upfront costs that we front. It's just a lot of work that goes in that's not accounted for, I guess you could say. So we get paid through an acquisition fee. So anybody that's on the general partner side or the pilot side gets paid. Usually it's 2%. It can be anything, 2 to 3%, 1 to 3%. 2 to 3% was normal. So of the purchase price, you get that at closing. That's basically your fee for setting this up and making this happen. That's your pay for making this exist. Besides that, we usually get an asset management fee, which is usually 2 to 5% of net revenue. So net revenue, not gross revenue, which is another important thing. So it's usually nominal unless you're running a huge deal, but that's your payment for managing the deal throughout. So if management gets paid monthly X amount, or 8% or 7% or 5%, we're getting paid 2% for managing the managers. It's also a lot of work keeping that on board. Besides that, we have just our equity piece. So like the deal that we're doing right now, it's a 75-25 split. So limited partners get 75%, we get 25%. So any proceeds or profits or anything over their basic return, we get 25% of that, and 25% of the deal. So that usually comes at the end. One key thing, another kind of protection, I guess you
Gotcha.
could call it, is there's a preferred return, which most people offer right now, which means the partners that are limited get their payment first. So, for instance, say you have a 7% pref, we call it preferred return, and say you make 5%, the GP or me does not make any money until we hit over 7. So, it's a good alignment, and it's a good protection, I guess, that you're making sure the deal runs properly, because if it doesn't, I do not get paid. And some other protection that's just involved is the limited partners are only they're only liability, I guess you could say, is their invested capital. They're not signing on the loan. They're not liable for anything physical. The only thing that they have at stake is their investment, which is still a big deal, but it's much less than what we put on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is kind of the point I was leading towards because
Hmm.
I work in medicine. I have a lot of doctors that know what I do, and then they look at me and they're like, oh, you get pretty good returns on those little crappy single family houses you have, and I'm like, yeah, I do, but I was also setting mouse traps yesterday, and then I was also dealing with a sewer backup at another property the other day, like. Yeah, you can get decent returns. I'm not denying that if you do it the right way. But for higher income individuals, the question is it worth your time? Because if you can go make $300 at your job, are you going to go want to do something that you could hire out for significantly less? If so, great. And I would argue focus on bigger deals. But if your time is worth more than mine is, or however you want to kind of refer to it. But if I was in a super high income earner's position that didn't have any interest in setting mousetraps and dealing with sewer backups, I would probably be investing in somebody else's deal because there's alignment of interest there. If I'm your limited partner and I'm putting money into a deal, I can at least rest easy at night knowing that okay, I'm not dealing with the tenants. What do they call it? The terrible T's, the tenants, termites, and toilets. Is that it?
Yep. Yep.
And that you Cole, the one that is, or at least managing the person that is, you don't get paid until I get my preferred return. So I think that's an important point to make for anybody that's like, well, is this? And I'm not trying to, be a salesperson for your syndication. Just syndication in general, I think makes sense for somebody that doesn't want to be in the weeds. And if you do want to be in weeds, that's fine. You're probably gonna, be better off, from a return standpoint. But there's also risk associated with that. There's risk in taking time away from your family or taking time away from a business that you might do better in. I have a friend
Right.
right now that is making a killing on Amazon sales, and he's like, "Oh, I think it's so cool that you do real estate." I'm like, "Dude, you made like 40 grand last month. Like, you know how many rentals you need to manage to make 40 grand in a month? Like, dude, if you got cash, just park it somewhere."
Right.
Like, so there's different benefits for different people, which I think is an important thing to think about when it comes to these, that there could be mutually beneficial situations for everyone. So kind of explain that preferred return a little bit more. So let's say the deal is turning a cash on cash percent of, let's say, 11%. We have a preferred return of 7%. If there's a 4% spread there, you're essentially getting 1% as the general partner, and the limited partners are getting the other 3%, basically 75% of the delta between the performance of the deal and the preferred return. Is that correct?
Yep. That was perfectly said. Yep. So they get their preferred return, which in your case, say that's 7. And then anything over that, we split 75-25.
Gotcha. Okay. And then tell us about the sale. Like, let's say this deal, performs as planned. 5 years from now, you decide to sell or refinance. How does that work there? Whatever gets paid out to, 123 Main Street LLC at closing, that's also split 75-25.
Yep, exactly. We just pay normal closing costs just like anyone else would, and that just comes out of proceeds, which are basically, already guessed. And then any, true proceeds just get split, like you said, 75-25. Um, and if there's any other like outstanding balances or whatever, that gets paid back and closed out as well. But the basis is yeah, it just gets split like that.
Awesome. And I don't know if you kind of have looked at your overall tax burden being a real estate investor versus like being an employee previously, but investing in real estate has a fair share of benefits from, a tax standpoint. So if someone is like a high W-2 income earner, what are some of the reasons that, getting returns from real estate might be uh, you know, more optimal compared to just making a little bit more money at their job?
Yes, there's two ways you can look at it. First way is if you have your own portfolio, not investing in somebody else's or another like bigger syndication. If you're have your own properties, you're taking losses usually, and you're figuring out some way to show a loss or just to account for the income that you're making. And you can also use, depreciation, or if it's a large enough building, a cost segregation and bonus depreciation. So basically, you're trying to figure out how you can show a loss so that you can reduce your income. And, that's in your control if you have your own portfolio, for the most part. If you're investing in like a syndication, same kind of idea, but at the end of the year, you would get what's called a K1, which is like your share of the deal. And when you do a syndication, you're on a smaller time frame. So it's usually a bigger deal, and so you're running a cost seg. So you're using bonus depreciation, and so although you're getting distributions throughout the year of X amount of dollars, the depreciation is just a huge chunk that we're showing, and so you're going to show a loss, and that's going to offset your other income, whether it's active or from other investments, whatever it is. So whether you're building your portfolio yourself or you're investing in a syndication, the tax benefits are awesome. Usually centered around depreciation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of like the point I wanted to make is, we're not accountants by any means, but a wise man once said, I think it was Robert Kiyosaki, that, if you're paying taxes on the profit you make from your real estate, you're doing something wrong because of just how many write-offs there are. And I mean, depreciation being kind of the most powerful one. That I know for myself, all my rentals the last couple of years, any profit I'm making is pretty much offset by the fact that I'm able to write off the interest I'm paying on the loan, my property taxes, and then most importantly, the depreciation. So, those are all kind of, phantom expenses.
Mm-hmm.
The IRS assumes and allows you to write off depreciation the same way, the garbage company can write off the fact that, okay, this garbage truck is going to last me roughly 10 years. Therefore, I can write off 10% of the value of this garbage truck over 10 years. I don't know if those are real numbers, but that's an example. The same way the IRS says, well, I forget the exact number for commercial, but I know for residential, 27 and a half years. They assume that your property is going to wither away into nothing in 27 and a half years, when in fact, properties in general appreciate. So, so many, ways to make money from real estate. Anybody listening, hopefully we don't need to kind of convince them on why they should invest in real estate. But, the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of different ways that not only do you make money in real estate, but you can save money, on your tax burden, by being involved in real estate, whether it is, actively or passively. So I do want to kind of head into the last sort of segment of our show. But is there anything else you want to kind of mention about that syndication deal? 9 units. What's the business plan there? What's the time horizon? Give us your last kind of elevator pitch in regards to what your business plan is for this property.
Yeah. Absolutely, and there's things I kind of can't say with this, so I'll give you all the details that I can say. But the basic plan is we're buying this under market. So rents right now are between like 850, average, and they, as is without touching it, should be 1350, which is a huge jump. So we're adding a ton of value, year one. It comes out to about 300,000 in value added year one just by stabilizing and bringing things up to market without doing any renovations, which is massive. We're also going to, as those units turn, which I'm sure most of them will, we're going to do some modernizing. So that consists of, maybe doing countertops, fixtures, faucets. If it needs something that's just beaten up or outdated, we'll replace that, make it very nice. But we're not going to put a ton in because they're already nice. So we'll do that modernization though, and we're going to push them up to 15. So year one, we're adding massive equity, and then we're going to let appreciation play its role over the next, 3, 4, 5 years. And it's going to, just keep going that way with rent bumps and other things. Besides that, we're renovating the laundry room. There's a small laundry room in the basement. It's its own separate room and it's nice, but it's just beaten up. It's like a, very obvious mom and pop laundry room. So we want to go in, put some flooring in, make it look nice, just make it a little bit more community feel, which I think this property already has. A couple other things. We're going to go into the basement, which is massive and it's unfinished. We're going to kind of make that a little bit nicer, and then we're going to add some storage and make these big storage containers out of like basically wire mesh.
There you
And
go.
we can put them in and we can rent them out to some of the tenants for 25, $50 a month, which is huge when it comes to NOI. So all these different factors to try to raise it. And so that's kind of our basic business plan. And our whole time we're floating 5 or 6 years. Depends on the external environment, what things look like. And I think what else with it, but it's an awesome deal. So we're very excited to be a part of this. There's always some kind of projects we're working on.
You gonna throw a vending machine in that laundry room?
Absolutely. I don't actually know if we're going to do that, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, man.
See if we can find one.
I mean, if you're not gonna, I kind of want to say that like part of my cash flow each month comes from a vending machine, So if you don't want to put the capital in and you want to just rent like a 3 by 3 section to me, I will rent that from you. You can throw it on your thing, and I'll put a vending machine in your laundry room if you let me. Because I just think it's cool to tell people, yeah, I got X amount of units or whatever. I work my W-2. Oh yeah, my favorite money I make each month is from a vending machine though.
Yeah, listen, washer dryers and vending machines, quarters are king.
Dude, I want to just make it rain quarters.
Quarters it is.
All
Look,
right.
I've heard such good things from people with laundromats, and they all just talk about that. Just they go in, get a bucket of quarters every day or every week, and they say it's great.
There's a guy on YouTube that bought a laundromat and he went viral from it. Had like he literally just had a video on his cell phone of him going to empty the quarters. It's like, yeah, I just bought this laundromat. It's this like mobile home guy in like Ohio. I should find his at to shout him out. But yeah, he bought a laundromat, shot a video on his cell phone, and like the thing had like a couple million views in like a few days. I
Wow,
think it went onto like the explore page on YouTube. And then he like made another video. He's like, yeah, that one random video I made about me emptying quarters at a laundromat. It made him like close to $3,000 just in ad revenue from like his one stupid video going viral. It's just like pretty wild. But all
crazy.
right, man. Transitioning to kind of the end of our show here. Any piece of advice you'd give other people out there looking to do what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the biggest piece of advice is be ready to put everything on the table. I think a lot of people underestimate what it takes to truly build a portfolio, and it takes everything. It takes a massive sacrifice, time, effort, money. So I think, the best advice I tell people is like you really need to be ready to sacrifice and put everything on the table to be successful.
Awesome advice. How has your investing strategy changed over the years?
It's evolved because it started with do it myself. I can do everything the best, whatever. And it's now okay. This is bigger than me. I need to delegate. I need to hire. I need to create a team and lead others. So it's not just about me now. It's about my team. It's how can we all be the most efficient and the best.
Absolutely. Ever receive any bad advice?
Yeah, the worst advice I've ever received, and this is so I forget the word at the moment, but if you find a deal, the money will follow. I hate that. I absolutely hate that. I think it applies if you're buying like a single unit or like a duplex. Controversial. Oh my gosh, there's the word. If you're buying, something small, yeah, you can just find the money because what's 50 or 100,000 in the grand scheme of the world. But when you're buying $1 million, $5 million, $10 million building, that money is not just there. If you're gonna raise that, it's just not. I've experienced it myself. I talked to other people that have massive portfolios. It's just like this baited tactic I feel like that is spread, and it's so frustrating to hear because a lot of people talk about that and they get into this with that idea and then they get crushed. So I'm really passionate about debunking that.
All right. Sounds good. Well, dude, the money's gonna come for this deal. We're gonna get it raised. All right. Any asset class you're interested in but haven't invested in yet, other
Yeah,
than vending machines?
other than vending machines, what I'm super interested in, but I honestly know nothing about it, is like office space. I think it's super interesting. I think it could be big. I mean, it's getting crushed right now, which is why I'm not even going to touch it. And I think focus is key,
Buy
so it's just
low.
not something. Yeah, but definitely interested in office space.
All right, sounds good. And this is what Cap makes me put in these podcast episodes. So all right, Cole. If we wanted to do a deal with you, if anybody wanted to do a deal with you right now, what would it take? Are you looking for, a 30 unit at significantly below market rate? Are you looking for the best flip you've ever seen? What would it take for somebody, listening to this that thinks that your story is super compelling and wants to work with you? What would it take?
Yeah, I would say one of two things. So one, if somebody wants to work with me, the best possible way they can do it is give me a call and let's talk about your goals, and then bring 25 or whatever the investment is, and let's see if we can work something out. That's number one. That puts you right on my team, and we work together one on one. Number two is bring an amazing deal to the table, and if it's something that we can work together on, then we can figure that out.
Sounds good, man. All right, to wrap up here, how can our audience support you? Where can we find out more about you?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that, we're looking for support on is just finding people that are interested in the syndication world that we could talk to. So if somebody's interested in that and would like more details on just the process, how it works, any projects that are going on, the whole nine, we'd love to just talk to you about that, and we'd love just, explaining more because we think it's super beneficial. So that's the biggest thing. We have tons of content on our website. If you go to volcancapital.com, there's all sorts of info on me, myself, our company, blogs out the wazoo, our meetup, so many different things that are on there.
Okay, awesome. Volcan Capital. That's V as in Victor,
Yes,
Olcan capital.com.
nailed it.
All right,
Yep.
and you're Cole at volcancapital.com.
Yes, sir. And that's my email. So email, if you have any questions, concerns, or just, love to chat, Cole at volcancapital.com. Like you said, Volcan capital.com. And you can find me on socials anywhere as well. It's just under Cole, Farrell, Farrell. Two R's, two L's. You can Google it, whatever. It'll pop up.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole, for joining us today. Your story is super inspiring. I can't wait to see where you go from here, man. All right. For the Bill
I
and Kap
appreciate it.
Show, I'm just Bill today. Thanks again, Cole. All right. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.